There are nights when two people lie side by side, but their hearts are oceans apart. She once loved him with everything she had, believing he would finally see her if she were kind, gentle, and loving enough. But one night, in the middle of a glittering dinner filled with light and laughter, her husband turned to her and said, before everyone, "Stop acting like you own me. You don't get to tell me where I go, or who I'm with." She smiled softly, answering only, "You're right, because we no longer belong to each other." That night, when he came home, his key no longer fit the lock, and she, the woman everyone thought was fragile, quietly began to rewrite her destiny. Hello, my dear family. Welcome back, where every tale is a journey through love, tears, and rebirth. Every moment you spend listening is a blessing to me. If you believe that every woman deserves respect, if you've ever lost faith but still chose love, then leave a heart EBS and subscribe to walk this journey together. Because today, you'll hear a powerful story. The story of a woman who lost everything and found herself again. That night, Seattle was wrapped in a veil of cold silk mist blanketing the hills, reflecting the golden glow of hundreds of lavish villas. From afar, the Marshal's mansion rose like a castle in the fog, its tall glass windows ablaze with light. Luxury cars lined along the cobblestone drive. Laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music spilled from the ballroom, blending into the city's cool rain. Binta Gold stood quietly at the end of the hallway, watching the guests laughing around the 12-meter dining table. Crystal glasses shimmered under candlelight, white orchids bloomed, and the glow reflected off her teal silk gown, the one she'd chosen because her husband had said, "Wear something that makes you look like the wife of a successful man." She had done exactly that. But tonight, looking around, Binta knew she was nothing more than a decoration in Adam Marshall's world. He sat at the head of the table, relaxed, a glass of scotch in hand, wearing that smug smile. Around him were his associates, men in black suits with gold watches gleaming at their wrists, and the women beside them, with curious, envious glances and polished compliments. Everything was designed to praise him, the man who resurrected Marshall Development from the ashes. Only Binta knew whose money those ashes were rebuilt with. Adam had arrived nearly 2 hours late. When he finally walked in, he still carried the scent of cigarettes and someone else's perfume. She hadn't said a word in front of the guests, just waited until he went to the kitchen to ask quietly, "I just wanted to know if you're okay." A simple question, but his eyes darkened instantly like a wounded beast being touched where it hurt. "Okay? You're always interrogating me, Binta. Who do you think you are?" She didn't respond. She only turned away, unwilling to create a scene. But he wouldn't stop. Returning to the table, he raised his glass, and when the music faded, he spoke in that half-drunken, arrogant tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, what's really exhausting about success? Coming home and hearing questions like, 'Where were you? With who? Why didn't you call?' As if I'm a child who needs permission to breathe." Laughter rippled around the table. Binta froze. Every gaze turned to her. Adam looked at her and laughed loudly. "Stop acting like you own me, Binta. You don't get to tell me where I go, or who I'm with." The words sliced through the air like a cold blade. The room went still. Candles crackled faintly. Someone tried to smile but couldn't. A few men awkwardly lifted their glasses. A few women looked down at their plates. Binta stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she gently set her glass down. Her voice was calm, so calm it almost sounded like a whisper. "You're right, Adam. I don't own you, and you no longer belong to me." The sound was soft, but it froze the room. Adam gave a forced laugh. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic, honey. See, everyone? Women always too emotional." "Thank you all for coming," Binta interrupted. "The dinner is over. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." She stood, straight-backed, her gaze steady as it swept across the room. The silence was thick, uneasy. No one dared speak. As she walked away, her heels clicked against the wooden floor, sharp, cold, deliberate. Outside, the rain had started. She stepped into it, took a deep breath, and pulled out her phone. "Mr. Jacobs, it's time." A low voice answered, "We're ready. The locks will be changed the moment you leave." Binta hung up, looking at the second-floor window where golden light spilled through. Adam's shadow moved there, still laughing, playing the role of a powerful man. She smiled, not with anger, not with tears, just the quiet smile of someone who finally realized the battle was over and she had won in silence. Near midnight, the sound of tires rolled over rain-soaked streets. Adam's Bentley stopped before the iron gate. Headlights lit up his face, pale, washed with old pride and stale liquor. He stumbled out, jammed his key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. Tried again. Nothing. "Damn it," he muttered. "Binta, open the door." Only the rain answered. He pulled out his phone, dead battery. Slammed the door harder. "Binta, don't be mad. Open up." From the shadows by the hedge, a deep voice spoke. "No one's inside, Mr. Marshall." Adam spun around. Darnell Jacobs stepped forward, umbrella tilted, half his face hidden in the rain. "Darnell, what's going on? The lock's broken?" "No, she changed it." Adam let out a short, bitter laugh. "Changed it? This is my house." "No, Adam. It's hers. It's always been hers." Darnell handed him a thick manila envelope. "She asked me to give you this." Adam tore it open. Papers fell out, soaked by the rain. Property deeds, investment accounts, wire transfers. Every line told the same story. The house, the company, the wealth, everything he'd built his pride on had been bought, saved, and sustained by her. He stared down, voice breaking. "No, I built Marshall Development. She saved your company from bankruptcy. 7 years ago, it was her money that kept you alive." Adam staggered back, slipping on the wet tiles. "Why? Why would she do that and never tell me? Maybe because she loved you, or maybe because she knew you couldn't stand being saved by your wife." The wind picked up, sharp and cold. Adam looked up at the mansion. A light flickered on upstairs, 2 silhouettes behind the curtain, his mother, Eleanor, and his wife. "Mom?" His voice trembled. "Mom, what are you doing there?" No reply. Eleanor stood beside Binta, eyes steady like judgment itself. 2 security guards approached, raincoats dark, flashlights cutting through the mist. "Mr. Marshall," one said, "Miss Gold requests that you leave the property. This is private property." Adam stared, uncomprehending. "I've lived here for 10 years. I paid every bill." "No, sir." "She did. With her money." They waited as he stepped back toward his car. Before getting in, Adam looked up at the mansion one last time. It shimmered like a glass castle in the rain, beautiful, perfect, and entirely out of reach. He sat inside, trembling. The papers on his lap were soaked, the ink running, but her name still shone through the blur. Binta Gold. He clenched them in his hands, as if holding the ashes of his own pride. The engine started. He drove off into the rain, not knowing where to go. The city stretched ahead, familiar streets now strange. Everything he thought he owned, his house, company, and life, had vanished in one night. Across town, Binta sat on the balcony of her temporary apartment, a cup of hot tea in her hands. Before her lay a small piece of paper with her late mother's words. "Never love a man who looks through you, instead of seeing you." She smiled softly, lifting her gaze to the sky. For the first time in years, she felt light. Not because she had won, but because, finally, she had chosen herself. Late winter Seattle had a strange light, like even the sun was tired of shining through the thick mist. The whole city seemed draped in a thin grey veil, quiet and still, with only the chill sneaking into every fingertip. Binta Gold sat in a small cafe on the corner of Union Street, one of those places few people ever noticed. Her eyes followed the blurred world outside the fogged window. On the table, her phone rested beside a half-finished cappuccino, long gone cold. She had been waiting for over 15 minutes. A part of her wanted to stand up and go home, as she always did, to that mansion on Queen Anne Hill, where she lived like a guest in her own life. But today, she refused to go back out of habit. The cafe door opened, and a woman walked in camel coat, brown leather boots, a decisive stride. She looked in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a warm voice. "Mrs. Gold? I'm Josephine Carter." Binta rose to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming. I don't want anyone to know about this meeting." "I understand," Josephine said. "Women who come to see me usually don't want anyone to know why." She sat down, opening her briefcase. "So, how can I help you?" Binta stayed silent for a while, eyes drifting to the window. Snowflakes fell softly, melting the moment they touched the glass. "I want to know, if a woman works, contributes money, puts her name on the property, but her husband doesn't know any of it legally, who owns it?" Josephine tilted her head slightly. "If all the papers are in your name, The answer is simple. You do. And if he uses those assets, profits from them, and humiliates her in front of others, then the answer is still the same. But you should prepare yourself. It won't just be about the law. It will be a war. Binta gave a small, weary smile. Her voice came out hoarse. I've been living in a war for 7 years. I just pretended not to see it. Josephine studied her for a long moment. You know, I've met many strong women, but few are brave enough to say that out loud. I'm not strong, Mrs. Carter. Just tired. They talked for hours about the company, the assets, and the anonymous investments Binta had made when Marshall Development was on the brink of collapse. Adam never knew that the person who saved him from ruin was his wife. Why did you do it and never tell him? Josephine asked. Because I loved him, and I wanted to believe we would succeed together if he succeeded. But in his version of we, there's only one person. That line made Binta close her eyes. One tear slipped down, but she wiped it away before it could fall. Josephine slid a business card across the table. This is my personal number. If you really want to start, we have a lot to prepare. I won't ask why. Just be sure you want it to end. Binta looked at the card, then tucked it into her wallet. I do. But I don't want drama. I want him to watch everything disappear and never understand how. Josephine raised an eyebrow, half smiling. A silent war. I like that. The cold wind brushed her face when Binta stepped out of the cafe. Seattle was still grey, still quiet, but for the first time in years, she felt like she could finally take a deep breath without anyone's permission. That evening, when she returned home, Adam was in his study, phone in hand, laughing loudly with someone. She could hear him bragging from the hallway about the most successful deal of his career, his voice softening when he mentioned another woman's name. She didn't feel jealousy or anger, just a hollow certainty settling in her chest. Binta walked straight to the bedroom, opened her laptop, and logged into her investment account. Numbers flickered across the screen, each of them in her name. Each property, fund, and contract. She clicked on Transfer of Beneficiary. The prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to change the recipient's name? She typed, Adana Gold Foundation, her mother's name. Her hands didn't tremble. Binta sat there until midnight, listening to the rain outside. The glow of the screen danced in her eyes. In that vast, silent house, she felt sharper, clearer than she had in years. The first battle had begun, and no one, not even Adam, knew it had started. In the days that followed, Binta moved through life as usual. She still attended business meetings with her husband and smiled when the press praised Marshall Development, the new symbol of Seattle real estate. But beneath that calm surface, every step she took was calculated. Josephine called it the Grey Campaign. New noise, new declaration, just silent, steady movies. First, Binta asked Josephine's law firm to audit every contract. They discovered that most of Adam's major projects were registered under shell companies, whose legal founder was her. Next, she met privately with the bank to update account access. Then, with the accountant, to separate the reserve funds. Everything happened quietly, like an underground current beneath the ice. One afternoon, Adam came home to find her reading documents on the porch. What are you doing? He asked, a hint of irritation. Just helping you review some old paperwork, she replied softly, without looking up. What do you know about finance? He laughed. She smiled faintly. Maybe not much. But I do know how to read the name of the owner. He frowned, but brushed it off, thinking she was joking. She sighed quietly. His arrogance was the best ally she had. That night, Binta met Josephine again at the office. Only a desk lamp lit the room, its warm glow falling over a black and white photograph of Seattle in the rain. Everything's moving smoothly, Josephine said. I'll arrange for you to stay on as a silent investor. When the time comes, you'll have to sign. When is that? When he believes he's untouchable. When he humiliates you. One last time. Binta nodded. She knew Josephine was right. And deep down, she sensed that day wasn't far away. A week later, they attended a dinner with Adam's old friends. From the corner of the room, Binta listened as he told a story about his too strict wife. He laughed. Everyone laughed. No one noticed how her eyes grew colder with each word. She stood up quietly, took out her phone, and sent a short message to Josephine. Final stage ready. See you tomorrow. That night, she didn't sleep. Her mind replayed everything from the day they met in New York, to every time she forgave, every time she was hurt. All of it condensed into a single decision, to end it, not with screams, but with silence. The next morning at the law office, Josephine handed her a thick folder. "These are all the ownership documents. Just sign here." Binta picked up the pen. Black ink spread across the page, a single, deliberate stroke. "It's done," she said quietly. Josephine looked at her, admiration mingling with concern. "Are you afraid?" "Of course, but fear has never saved anyone." She left the office just as the rain began again. Seattle was wet, grey, cold, but inside her, something warm had begun to stir. It felt like walking through a door and knowing, finally, she was heading toward the light. Driving home, she stopped by Lake Union. The rain rippled across the surface, blurring the city's reflection. She thought of her mother's voice from years ago. "My dear, never let anyone define your worth by how little or how much they love you." Binta closed her eyes. The silent war was still unfolding. But this time, she held the map. And 6 months later, when that glass of wine hit the table at that glittering dinner, every move had already been made. Perfectly. That night, the wind from Puget Sound swept up Queen Anne Hill, carrying salt and a cold that cut through the skin. The rain kept falling thin, endless. Adam Marshall sat in his car, staring at the glowing house before him, which he once called his. Beside him lay the envelope Darnell had handed him, damp from the rain. The handwriting on the front made his heart tighten. Adam read this alone. Just a few words, yet his mother's voice echoed in his mind, slow, weary, not angry, only tired. He opened the envelope. Inside were rain-blurred papers and a long letter written in blue ink. The smell of old paper mixed with damp air was thick and heavy. He read the first line. "Adam, if you're reading this, it means you've lost everything. I know, because I once sat where you are now." Adam held his breath. "I know you resent me. You think I was weak for staying with a cruel husband, for enduring a false marriage, and you swore you'd never be like me. But my son, sometimes people run from a wound only to recreate it in another form." The rain pounded harder on the roof. Adam clenched the letter and read on. "You married a woman you never truly saw. She stood beside you through your hardest days. She took the name Marshall not for status, but because she believed you would be different. She believed what I once thought about your father, that love could save a man. But you turned that love into a chain." Her voice seemed to fill the car, each word sharper than any accusation. "When Binta told me she had saved your company from collapse, I stayed silent. I was afraid that if I spoke, you'd shout at me like your father once did. But today, I will not be silent." Adam folded the letter, leaned back against the seat, eyes closed. Memories came crashing in the sound of his father yelling, his mother crying in the kitchen, doors slamming in anger. He had once said, "I'll never be like him." And now, he was the perfect reflection of that man. He opened the letter again, hands trembling. "Adam, I told Binta I would go with her if she left, not because I betrayed my son, but because I chose to stand on the side of what's right. Sometimes, love doesn't mean standing next to someone, it means forcing them to face themselves." Beneath, on the last line, was her signature, Eleanor Marshall. A single page slipped from the envelope and was soaked through. It was a property authorization. His mother had transferred her inheritance to Binta. When Adam reached the final line, tears fell. For the first time in years, he cried not for loss, but for realizing what he had truly destroyed, his mother's respect and the heart of the woman who once loved him completely. The window above opened. He looked up. Through the white curtain, he saw his mother standing beside Binta. No anger, no contempt, just silence. That gaze, the same one that once held him as a child, now said only one thing: "It's time you take responsibility." Binta stepped forward and pulled the curtain closed. The light went out. The house sank into darkness. Adam sat motionless, listening to the rain hammer the windshield, matching the pounding in his chest. The world seemed to drain of sound. Finally, he started the engine. The car rolled down the hill. In the rearview mirror, the house faded, its lights dissolving into the rain. He knew no door in that place would ever open for him again. The next morning, Seattle was still drowning in rain, an endless, cleansing kind of rain, as if the sky was trying to wash the city clean. Adam woke in a shabby motel on the south side. Dim light leaked through the blinds, brushing across his pale face. The walls were cracked, the air damp with mildew. On the table lay his mother's letter, flattened and dry after he'd pressed it gently between paper towels. He reread it. Her voice was still there, warm, steady, though each word cut deeper than before. He remembered her hands on his shoulders, her quiet words. "Adam, don't let pride kill your kindness." He'd laughed back then. Now, that sentence clung to him like a curse. He stood and faced the mirror. The reflection staring back was gaunt, eyes red. "What have you done with your life, Adam?" he whispered. No answer. Only the rain replied, soft and cold. The phone rang a number he didn't know. "Mr. Marshall," a voice said, "I'm calling from your bank. I'm afraid we've had to freeze 3 more of your accounts per legal request from your wife's counsel." He froze. The voice kept talking, but he heard nothing, only a low hum filling his head. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the bed. Then a knock. Adam opened the door to find Darnell Jacobs, soaked and solemn, standing there. "I'm sorry to bring this, sir," Darnell said quietly. "Mrs. Eleanor asked me to give it to you, if you were sober enough to read." He handed Adam a small envelope and left without another word. Inside was a photograph of Adam, his mother, and Binta at the opening of Marshall Development's first project. On the back, in his mother's handwriting, "If you want to find yourself again, be honest with her." Adam sat on the bed, staring at the photo. Binta's smile was full of hope, the kind of faith he had shattered. He traced her face with his thumb, and tears blurred the image again. By late afternoon, he drove to the coast. The rain still fell, the horizon lost in mist. He stood there for hours, letting the wind slap his face, realizing that for the first time he had nothing left to defend, no one left to impress. He opened his phone and scrolled to their old messages. The last one from her read, "Don't forget to buy tulips for Mom. She loves yellow ones." A simple reminder, yet now it carried all the tenderness he no longer deserved. He began typing, "Binta, I'm sorry. You don't have to forgive me. Just know I understand now." He stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted them. Maybe she didn't need to hear from him anymore. Maybe his apology would only reopen what she had finally healed. The rain stopped. The sky turned from grey to pale blue. Light shimmered on the surface of the sea. A lone seagull rose from the water, wings heavy with rain but still flying. Adam whispered to himself, maybe it's time to learn how to fly when no one's watching. That evening, he left Seattle. No one knew where he went. Only Binta found a vase of yellow tulips on the table when she came downstairs the next morning. Beneath it, a handwritten note, "For Mom, and for the woman who taught me what kindness truly means." She didn't cry. She stood there long, listening to the wind beyond the windows. Some apologies never need to be spoken. Some forgiveness doesn't need to be declared. They exist in the quiet, like a mother's letter, a prayer for those still learning how to be better. Seattle, a grey, rainy May morning. The wind tossed early newspapers across wet sidewalks. On the front page of the Seattle Chronicle, a bold headline read, "Businessman Adam Marshall, under financial fraud investigation, the mysterious woman behind Marshall Development revealed." Beneath is a photo of Binta Gold in a long beige coat, with a calm face, walking out of the courthouse beside attorney Josephine Carter. Behind her, Adam tried to avoid the cameras, his face pale, his eyes vacant. His phone rang nonstop. Calls from the bank, from the board, from reporters. Every time he picked up, it was another blow. "Mr. Marshall, your accounts have been temporarily frozen pending an emergency audit. Marshall Development stock is down 18% in 2 hours. The press wants your comment on Mrs. Gold's claim that she's been the official shareholder for 7 years. Adam didn't answer. He tossed the phone onto the couch, stepped out to the balcony, and stared at the city, drowning in rain. The sound of horns, of waves in the distance, all of it felt like noise from another world. Binta once said, "Adam, I don't care about money. I want respect." And he had laughed. Now, he finally understood respect was the one thing no amount of money could buy back. By noon, he was at the office. The halls were nearly empty. A few employees looked up, then quickly looked away. The door to the CEO's office was locked. His nameplate, Adam Marshall, CEO, was gone. In its place, Gold Restoration Properties. He stood frozen. Every brick of this building, every design, every boast he'd made now carried her name. Patrick Doyle, his longtime associate, stepped out of the elevator, avoiding his eyes. "Patrick, what's going on?" Adam asked, his voice rough. "Adam, I don't know how to say this. The board voted this morning. They appointed Binta as interim director. She can't do that. She can. She's the founding shareholder. She's had the rights all along. Patrick sighed, his tone soft but final. I'm sorry, my friend. You should rest. Adam watched him leave. The elevator doors closed, and Adam understood in that moment this wasn't just a downfall. It was total collapse. Of power, of reputation, of belief. He walked down the hallway, past a framed photo of him shaking hands with the mayor. The eyes in that photo were full of pride. The smile was self-assured. Now the man standing beneath it was soaked, trembling, hollow. His phone rang again. It was Gerald Shaw, once his closest friend. Adam, we need you to sign the release form. The company has to protect its image. We're removing your name from all communications. Removing me? I founded this company. Adam, Gerald's voice was cold. That company was never yours. You were just the face. And that face is now costing us everything. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed in the silence. Adam threw the phone to the floor. It split in two. He sank into the couch, head in his hands. The sound of rain against the glass felt like a weakening heartbeat. He remembered Binta's voice. Can't you see me, Adam? I'm disappearing inside my own life. He'd brushed it off then, calling her dramatic. Now, he was the one fading piece by piece. Outside, the media storm exploded. Newspapers called her the ghost investor, the mysterious woman who saved Marshall Development from ruin. She became a symbol. He became a fraud. That evening, the TV screen glowed in his dark apartment. Binta appeared, walking out of the courthouse in her beige coat, head held high. The caption beneath read, Binta Gold, the woman behind the Marshall Empire, and the one who ended it. Adam sat still, the pale light washing over his face. He didn't know whether to rage, to cry, or to finally admit the truth, that she had done what he never could. Stand up for herself. 3 days later, the city woke to another shock. The state prosecutor's office announced a full investigation into Marshall Development for misreporting financial statements and misuse of investment funds. Every outlet carried his photo. Every headline stung, from business star to betrayer. He was suspended from his role. His ID card was disabled. Security escorted him out of the building, which he once called his legacy. As the revolving doors closed behind him, he stood in the rain, holding a cardboard box with a few personal items, a photo of his mother and Binta, a pen, and a small notebook. Reporters swarmed. Mr. Marshall, do you comment on Mrs. Gold's accusations? Did you really build your empire with your wife's money? Do you think she's seeking revenge? Adam stopped, looked up, and answered quietly, no. She's just taking back what was always hers. That single sentence became the evening's headline, and for the first time, he had told the truth. That night, he returned to the small apartment he now rented. No mansion, no driver, just 4 walls, a few boxes, and the stale smell of dust. He sat on the floor, opened his old laptop, and scrolled through news articles. Each comment cut like glass. Leech. Men like this are terrifying. Poor wife. But good for her. He read them all, then closed the screen. Out on the balcony, the city glowed gold and grey. Seattle didn't care who won or lost, it kept breathing, moving, living. Only he had stopped. Inside, he felt something new, not anger, not grief, just emptiness. He picked up his phone and opened a photo of Binta. She was in that emerald dress, smiling gently. It was taken at their first company gala when he'd promised, I'll build you an empire you'll be proud of. He had done it, just not the way he imagined. Now that the empire had fallen, and from its ashes, Binta had risen. The next morning, Adam was summoned to the Department of Investigation. On the drive there, the car radio played a news update. Sources confirmed that Mrs. Binta Gold has filed to dissolve all shared assets. Financial institutions have officially transferred ownership to her. When asked for comment, she said only, I'm not here to destroy anyone. I want fairness. Adam turned off the radio. For the first time in a long time, he smiled, tired, but genuine. Fairness. A word he'd once thought meaningless, now sharp as truth. As he stepped into the cold grey building, he looked at Seattle's heavy sky. Maybe this was the ending he needed, so he could finally start again, if life would let him. Across town, in the office of Gold Restoration Properties, Binta stood by the window, watching rain blur the rooftops. She didn't feel triumphant, not vengeful, just calm. Josephine entered, placing a folder on her desk. All procedures are complete. He no longer has any legal ties to the company. Binta nodded, eyes still on the window. Mrs. Carter, do you ever feel that victory can still hurt? Josephine smiled softly. Yes, because in every war, the greatest loss is always a piece of your heart. Binta was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, I never wanted him to lose everything. I just wanted him to understand the worth of respect. Josephine placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe that's exactly what he's learning now, Binta. Outside, the rain eased. A pale sunlight broke through the clouds, falling gently over the glass tower that bore her name. Gold restoration, glowing softly, like the first light of a new beginning. That morning, Seattle seemed to hold its breath. The rain had stopped, the sky was a muted silver, and clouds drifted lazily above the federal courthouse downtown. Outside the granite steps, hundreds of reporters crowded together, cameras flashing like lightning. A black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and Binta Gold stepped out wearing a long beige coat, her hair neatly pinned, her face calm but her eyes bright. Beside her was Josephine Carter, small in stature but radiating a quiet authority that silenced the crowd as she passed. The voices rose. Binta, do you have a statement for the press? Are you really the woman behind all of Marshall Development? Is this revenge? She stopped, smiled faintly. No. I'm just here to tell the truth. The courthouse doors opened. Binta stepped inside. The air was cool, austere. Light filtered through tall windows, falling in long beams across the marble floor. Adam was already seated on the opposite side of the room, black suit, weary eyes, hands clasped tightly. He saw her, but she didn't look back. Judge Margaret Ellis lifted the gavel, her hair silver, gaze sharp. The United States District Court of Seattle Gold v. Marshall is now in session. The room fell silent. Josephine rose for the opening statement. Your Honor, we present this case not to humiliate, but to restore, to prove the legal right of a woman erased from the very empire she helped build. She placed a stack of documents on the table, pages stamped, signed, dated. Marshall Development, established in 2016, was funded through the investment firm Adana Ventures LLC, owned by Mrs. Binta Gold. We have bank records, witness testimony, and transfer receipts to prove it. Adam's attorney, a gray-haired man, stood up. The plaintiff suggests she owns the company, yet Mr. Marshall led it to success. Josephine smiled slightly. Indeed, he led it, but with whose money? She turned toward Binta, then back to the judge. Exhibit A is a $2 million transfer made in 2016 from Mrs. Gold's personal account to Marshall Development, labeled Emergency Rescue Fund. No loan agreement, no repayment terms, no entry in the books. By law, that constitutes equity. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Adam lowered his head. His fingers tightened. Josephine's tone softened, but stayed firm. Mrs. Gold never revealed this because she trusted her husband. But when he humiliated her publicly with the words, "Stop acting like you own me," she understood he never saw her as part of the empire at all. The room went still. Judge Ellis looked directly at Adam. Mr. Marshall, do you have a response? He stood, voice hoarse but steady. I don't deny she helped me. But I didn't know she used her own money. I thought it came from outside investors. Josephine's voice cut softly through the silence. Did you not know? Or did you not want to know? Adam said nothing. From the gallery, Eleanor Marshall, his mother, sat quietly, clutching her rosary, eyes glistening. She didn't speak, but her gaze carried both sorrow and forgiveness. Josephine turned back to the bench. Your Honor, we ask not only for recognition of legal ownership, but also for restoring dignity to a woman erased from her legacy. She does not want money. She wants the truth to have her name again. That afternoon, the first witness took the stand. Thomas Lee, chief accountant. His hands trembled as he spoke. I'm sorry, but yes, Mrs. Gold did transfer funds to the company. She asked me to keep it confidential to protect her husband's image. Who instructed you to remove her name from the public records? Josephine asked. Thomas hesitated, eyes flicking toward Adam. Mr. Marshall. A collective sigh swept the courtroom. Josephine nodded quietly. No further questions. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. Adam stared at the floor. Eleanor closed her eyes. Binta sat motionless, fingers intertwined, chest rising slowly. She didn't feel triumphant, just free, as if ice, long frozen, was beginning to melt. Day 2. The sun finally broke through after weeks of rain, its light spilling through the courthouse windows. Josephine called the final witness, Eleanor Marshall. A stir ran through the crowd as she stood. She strolled to the stand, steady despite her age. Placing a hand on the Bible, she spoke softly. I, Eleanor Marshall, swear to tell the truth. Josephine approached. Mrs. Marshall, can you tell the court what you know? Eleanor's gaze found her son. Adam couldn't meet her eyes. I knew about the money. I knew Binta saved the company. I knew because I carried messages between them when Adam was at his lowest. And I stayed silent. I thought, when a woman loves a man, sometimes she must keep such secrets to protect his pride. But I was wrong. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. I taught my son that success means nothing if it comes at the cost of kindness. He forgot, and I forgot that silence can be complicity. Judge Ellis nodded gently. Thank you, Mrs. Marshall. Eleanor turned toward Binta and gave her a small, sorrowful smile, a wordless apology that said everything. That afternoon, the courtroom fell quiet again. Binta was called to make her final statement. She rose, not looking at Adam, not at the audience, only at the judge. I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came to be seen, to have it acknowledged that I existed in this story. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. People say men build empires while women stand behind them. But without the hands, sacrifices, and sleepless nights, no empire stands. I don't need my name carved on a building. I need it not to be erased. From the gallery, someone sniffled. Eleanor bowed her head, tears streaming. Josephine reached over and gently held Binta's hand. Binta continued, I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I want to be free. Forgiveness is the last thread that binds you to your past, and when you cut it, you can finally breathe. She looked up, meeting the judge's eyes. I only wish to live the rest of my life as a woman who no longer has to hide her strength. Judge Ellis lifted the gavel. After reviewing all evidence, this court finds Mrs. Binta Gold is the rightful owner of Marshall Development, now operating as Gold Restoration Properties. Mr. Adam Marshall is hereby removed from all executive authority and held responsible for legal restitution costs. The gavel struck 3 times. The room rose. Evening light streamed through the tall windows, bathing Binta's face in a soft gold. She exhaled no smile, no tears, just peace. Adam looked up at her, eyes heavy. As she turned to leave, he whispered, Thank you. She paused for a heartbeat. Without turning back, she replied quietly, Live well. Outside, reporters swarmed again. Microphones stretched toward her, voices overlapping. Binta said only one thing. Sometimes justice isn't in the verdict, it's in having the courage to say, I'm here. Today, I said it. She walked through the crowd, sunlight glinting on her coat, the wind carrying the faint scent of tulips from the park across the street. At that moment, Binta Gold was no longer the broken wife, the shadow behind a man's empire. She was herself, free, luminous, and unshakably intense. 3 weeks after the trial, Seattle had changed seasons. The cold rains had faded, giving way to a fragile sunlight spilling through apartment windows and over leafy streets. In the house once called the Marshall Estate, now bearing a new name, the Gold residence Binta woke to stillness. No footsteps, no carenguines, just the scent of jasmine tea and the soft light glinting off an old photo. Her and her mother, smiling in a golden field when she was 10. She wrapped herself in her late mother's silk shawl and stepped onto the balcony. From here, she could see the entire city, once a stage for power and pride, now quiet, as if the storms had never happened. Eleanor, her former mother-in-law, now her closest friend, appeared, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. Couldn't sleep? No. Every time I close my eyes, I see the courtroom, the gavel, the cameras, people calling my name. That's the price of being heard, Binta. When you speak the truth, the world makes noise. It's loud, but it's how things change. Binta traced the rim of her cup. I thought winning would feel light, but it doesn't. There's something still tight inside me. Maybe because, to fight for justice, I had to harden parts of myself. And now I don't know how to soften again. Eleanor smiled gently. Then learn softness again, my dear. Not to be weak, but to be at peace. That afternoon, Binta met Dr. Amara Lewis, a therapist known for helping women rediscover their voices after loss. Her office was bright and small, filled with oil paintings of the sea, soft waves, calm skies. Amara studied Binta for a moment, then said, "I've seen you in the news. You're strong. Strength isn't always pleasant, doctor." "No," Amara nodded. "Sometimes strength just means you're hurting but still standing." Binta let out a quiet laugh, the first real one in days. "You understand too well, because I've been where you are. I once thought saving the man I loved would mean he'd love me more, but not everyone knows how to cherish the one who saves them." The air grew tender. Binta leaned back, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought he'd change if I loved him enough, but the more I loved, the more I disappeared." "You didn't disappear, Binta," Amara said softly. "You hid, and now you're returning. Call this what it is, rebirth." Binta paused, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "Rebirth. It's a beautiful word. Every phoenix burns before it flies again, Binta. You've walked through fire. Now it's time to spread your wings." That night, she came home and opened the door to her old room, where she once waited for a husband who always came home too late, the room where she once cried quietly, feeling invisible. Now it was bright and new, the walls were painted cream, and the desk was covered in architectural plans and folders, the foundation of her next chapter, community housing projects for women and children. She opened a wooden box her mother had left her. Inside lay a letter, yellowed with time. "My daughter, never love someone so much that you lose your own voice. When someone truly loves you, they'll want to hear that voice, not silence it. If you ever find yourself shrinking to please someone, remember that gold women's blood runs in you. We were not born to be someone's shadow. We were born to shine beside them." Binta folded the letter, pressed it to her chest, and closed her eyes. A deep breath, a quiet smile. Her mother felt close, still guiding her. A month later, Gold Restoration Properties broke ground on its first major project, the Sunlight Homes, a network of housing for women and children escaping abuse, with training centers, counseling clinics, and free childcare. On the opening morning, the courtyard was filled with people, cameras flashing. Binta stepped onto the small stage, holding a microphone. "I don't want to build the tallest building in this city," she said warmly. "I want to build the warmest home for those who once believed they were invisible." Women in the crowd nodded through tears. Some held each other's hands. In the back row, a man stood quietly, Adam. Plain shirt, no spotlight. He hadn't come to be seen, only to witness. Their eyes met briefly. No hatred, no bitterness. They were just two people who had lost and finally found themselves again. After the ceremony, Adam approached, keeping a respectful distance. "You did what I only talked about." "No," Binta said softly. "I just did what needed to be done. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance to make things right. I'm learning how to live again." "Then keep learning. And don't teach with words, teach by living differently." Adam nodded. His eyes, once full of pride, were now calm. Together, they looked at the newly built complex, white walls, blue windows, sunlight spilling across the sign. Adana Center, a place where every woman is seen, heard, and respected. Binta's gaze lingered on her mother's name. Her heart filled. This, she thought, was the true legacy. Not mansions, not empires, but compassion. Back home, Eleanor greeted her that evening with a pot of warm soup. "You've begun to write your story again," she said. "Do you think I'll have the strength to finish it?" "You don't have to finish it," Eleanor smiled. "You just have to write it truthfully. Life will handle the rest." The two women sat together in the soft kitchen light. Outside, the city was quiet, the air fragrant with jasmine. "You know," Binta said softly, "I used to think being assertive meant needing no one. Now I know it means choosing who's worth walking beside." Eleanor's eyes glowed with pride. "You've become the woman your mother always hoped you'd be." Binta squeezed her hand. "No, I'm just finding my way back to myself." The light reflected in the window two women, 2 generations each, scarred but unbroken, choosing love, gentleness, and courage. And in that golden glow, Binta whispered, as if to her mother and to every woman who had ever been forgotten, "We weren't born to be saved. We were born to save ourselves and help others do the same." Outside, the first sunrise of summer crept over the rooftops, touching the newly built homes of the Adana Center, painting them in radiant light. From the ashes, another kind of empire was rising, An empire of compassion, of justice, of women who would never again fade into silence. Summer burned bright over Seattle. The first buildings of gold restoration were complete, sleek, clean, radiant under the Sunday. Newspapers couldn't get enough of her. Binta Gold, the woman redefining justice in real estate. The flame of a new century. But light always calls its shadows. And one quiet afternoon, just when everything seemed most peaceful, darkness returned. Not with thunder, but with a soft click. A mail carrier left a thick envelope at her gate, no sender's name. Only 3 bold words. Honor your commitments. Josephine picked it up, frowning. Handmade paper, Italian ink, private seal. Binta. Whoever sent this knows exactly what they're doing. Binta opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter, the handwriting sharp as a blade. My name is Vincent Calibresi. Mr. Marshall signed with me for 3 construction projects worth $80 million. Your company now holds those contracts. I expect you to honor them. In this world, refusing men like me isn't wise. Binta's expression didn't change. Who is he? Josephine's voice dropped. A real estate investor with East Coast mafia ties. Money laundering, bribes, shell companies, everyone knows. No one touches him. Adam signed with him, yes. And since you're the legal successor of Marshall Development, those deals fall to you. If you won't continue them, you'll be facing Vincent. Outside, the late sun stretched long shadows across the city skyline. Binta sat still, eyes calm. Not afraid, just steady. I won't work with anyone threatening me, she said quietly. If he wants a war, he'll have one. But I'll fight with law, not fear. 3 days later, after Binta sent her formal letter declining the contract brief, polite, and sealed by her counsel, her office was broken into. Nothing was stolen, only chaos, papers scattered, computers smashed, and a single red phrase scrawled across the wall, pay the price. Josephine rushed in that night. Police took statements, but there's no trace. Vincent's network is everywhere. We have to be careful. Binta nodded. If he thinks intimidation will work, he hasn't learned what I've already survived. But this time, her fear wasn't for herself. It was for everyone around her. That evening, 2 strangers stopped Kesha, director of the community housing program, in the parking lot. They didn't harm her. They only whispered, "Tell Mrs. Gold not to break the deal. There are things money can't save." Shaken, Kesha fled. Binta brought her and 2 other staff members to stay at her home under protection. The women she had once rescued now needed her to protect them again. That night, rain fell softly against the glass. Binta stood by the window, city lights blurred by water. Eleanor padded behind her. "You're wondering if it's worth it, right?" "Yes," Binta murmured. "I fought to win my freedom. Now I have to fight again to keep it." "Freedom was never a gift," Eleanor said gently. "It's work that never ends, and you're doing it right." 2 days later, Josephine got a call from an unlisted number. The voice was low, calm, and dangerous. "Tell Binta to stop. She doesn't know who Vincent really is." Then silence. Josephine went straight to Binta's office. "That was a warning. He's going to act. We should call the FBI." "No," Binta said firmly. "This began with Adam. He signed those contracts before I inherited them. He needs to take responsibility." Josephine blinked. "You're going to contact him. There's no other way." After almost a year of silence, Binta met Adam Marshall again. The meeting took place in Josephine's private conference room. Adam arrived on time. He was thinner and quieter, his hair was short, and his clothes were simple. No gold watch, no arrogance, just a man stripped of his armor. He set a thick folder on the table. "I knew you'd eventually have to face Vincent," he said. "I worked with him once. I know what he's capable of." Binta crossed her arms, voice even. "You came to warn me or to save me?" "To save you, if you want to call it that. But really, to make things right." Josephine opened the folder. Inside were copies of contracts, handwritten notes of cash deals, and a list of bribed city officials. Precise, chilling. "How did you get all this?" Josephine asked. "I kept it as insurance. I was afraid Vincent would turn on me one day. Now I'm using it to protect her." Josephine skimmed the pages. "If these are authentic, this could launch a federal investigation." Adam nodded. "The originals are already with the FBI. They're verifying everything. All you need to do is stay quiet. When they strike, Vincent won't have time to react." Binta watched him. You're doing this for me? No, Adam said softly. I'm doing it because I owe you, and because I can't stand the thought of you paying for my mistakes. A pause. Then, quietly, I destroyed you with my pride. This is the only right thing I have left to do. Binta turned toward the window, Seattle's rain drumming like memory. If you truly want to do right, don't make this about redemption. Let it be a choice, a grown man's decision. He nodded. Understood. And even if you never forgive me, thank you for not erasing me from your world. 3 weeks later, Vincent Calibresi was arrested at his Bellevue mansion. The FBI raided at night. By morning, headlines blazed across the city. Real estate mogul Vincent Calibresi, charged with money laundering and federal bribery. Binta's name appeared nowhere. All evidence had been submitted by an anonymous source. Josephine arrived at her home with the morning paper. He's gone. No one will touch you again. Binta looked at the headline and exhaled slowly. Sometimes the world cleans itself, if you're patient enough. Josephine smiled. And sometimes, the people who once broke you become the ones who open your way out. That evening, Binta sat on the porch as a gentle drizzle fell. Eleanor joined her with a cup of cocoa. You heard the news? I did. Adam turned over everything. Do you feel lighter? Yes. And strange. Like he returned a piece of the justice I once fought for. Eleanor nodded, watching the mist lift from the garden. Sometimes forgiveness isn't spoken. Sometimes it's just seeing that someone has truly changed. Binta's gaze drifted toward the horizon. Maybe. But I don't want to look back anymore. I want to keep moving forward. Outside, the rain stopped. From the darkness, the city began to glow again, quiet, real, alive. Binta Gold had survived 2 wars. One of love, one of power. Both left scars. But from those scars, her light emerged, steady and unshakable. A light the shadows could never touch again. Seattle had turned a corner. The cold, misty mornings had given way to sunlight, gold and gentle spilling across rooftops, glinting through the trees, and dancing on the glass windows of the Adana Center, the community home Binta had built out of love and memory. The courtyard was alive with laughter. Children running, volunteers strumming guitars, women meditating on dew, wet grass. Through it all, Binta strolled beneath the eaves' white coat, loose hair, a calmness in her eyes that had taken a lifetime to earn. A small child ran up and placed a daisy in her hand. Miss Binta, I planted it. She knelt, brushing the child's hair gently. It's beautiful. You know, flowers only bloom when there's sunlight. But sunlight is only beautiful when someone stops to see it. The child giggled and ran off. Binta watched, her heart as light as the morning breeze. From a distance, Eleanor, once her mother-in-law, now simply mother, looked on with pride. You're learning how to smile for real. I don't know when it happened, Binta said softly. I just woke up this morning, saw the sky, and realized I wasn't afraid. Afraid of what? Of loving again, of trusting, of being myself. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Then, my dear, you've won the greatest battle. That afternoon at Gold Restoration, Binta met with her architects about a new project. The harbor, a housing community for the city's homeless, built along the waterfront. Blueprints covered the table. Small seaside homes filled with natural light, community gardens, and open classrooms. Ramona Perez, the fiery chief engineer, frowned playfully. Binta, I still don't get it. These projects barely make a profit. We could go luxury and earn 10 times more. Binta smiled. I've lived in the biggest house in the city, Ramona. It was colder than any shelter I've ever visited. Now I only want to build warm places, not expensive. Ramona hesitated, then nodded. All right then, we'll make it warm. That evening, Binta's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm in Portland. There's something I'd like you to hear if you're willing. Signed, A.M. She stared at the message for a long time. No anger, no flutter, just an old string vibrating somewhere deep inside. Eleanor noticed her stillness. Adam? Yes, he wants to meet. I'm not sure if I should. Sometimes, to truly close a story, you must look at it one last time just to know you've really walked past it. Binta nodded slowly. Then I'll go. Not to begin again, but to end it properly. 3 days later, she arrived in Portland, a smaller, gentler city. The air carried salt and pine. The afternoon light was an apology. She followed the address to a modest wooden building on the outskirts. A white sign read, The Restorers, Life Skills Academy for Young Men. Inside, laughter echoed. Dozens of young men were fixing engines, woodworking, and learning to cook. At the center stood Adam, sleeves rolled up, hair tousled, eyes brighter than she remembered. He looked up, surprised but relieved. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "So was I." They sat on a bench outside. The air smelled of sawdust and salt. Adam handed her a folded paper. "Certificate of incorporation," he said. "I called it the Restorers. Not just for repairing things, but for repairing ourselves." Binta read it, nodded. "That's good for you." "Not just for me," he said quietly. "For boys who grew up like I did, to teach them that being a man isn't about control. It's about responsibility." She looked at him, studying the man who had once been her ruin. "You've changed." "I had to. Losing everything showed me how much I'd had. I'm not here for forgiveness, Binta. I want you to know you made me believe that rebuilding is possible." Her eyes softened. "I don't hate you anymore, Adam. And I don't love you either. But I'm grateful because I'd never have learned how strong I could be without you." He smiled, genuine and quiet. "That's all I needed to hear. Thank you." Before she left, he took out an old photograph, the three of them at the first ribbon cutting years ago. He placed it gently in her hand. "Keep it. Remember that no matter how we ended, there was once something good." She looked at the photo, light spilling across their smiling faces, frozen in another life. "Goodbye, Adam. Be well, Binta." She walked away without looking back. Behind her, the sea wind whispered through the trees, mingling with the laughter of young men, the sound of something being mended. That night, in her small riverside hotel, Binta stood at the window, watching the lights ripple on the water. A full moon hung over Portland, bright and whole. She opened her phone, typed the first line of the book she'd been meaning to write. Sometimes light doesn't return from the sun, but from hearts that once broke and still chose to love. She saved the note, whispered into the quiet, "Mama, I've come home." The next morning, back in Seattle, her team was waiting. Ramona handed her a new proposal. "We've got an offer from the city council. They want to expand the Adana Center model statewide." Binta smiled, eyes warm. "Then the light is spreading." She walked to the window, looking down at the streets that had once felt cold. That summer, Seattle shone brighter than ever, not because of the sun, but because people had stopped living in the dark. She opened her phone again, adding one final line to her note. "Light doesn't just return, it stays, in everyone brave enough to live truthfully, even after falling." Outside, church bells rang, their sound carrying through the warm air. Binta stepped onto the porch, letting the sunlight wash over her face, no longer a wife, a victim, or a victor, just a woman, finally learning how to be happy. April in Seattle. Along the shores of Lake Union, tulips bloomed in waves of gold, the flowers Eleanor always planted whenever she wanted to begin something new. Sunlight spilled across each petal, glowing like 1,000 drops of light. Binta Gold sat by the window of her favorite cafe on Queen Anne Hill, where she often went after work. Summer table, summer yasmina tea. But today, her heart felt lighter. Outside, people walked dogs, couples held hands, and from somewhere down the street, a guitarist played "Here Comes the Sunday." Binta smiled a genuine smile. She no longer avoided the light. The door opened, and the breeze carried in the scent of coffee and tulips. A man entered, tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind, steady eyes. He wore a pale blue shirt and carried a worn book. The barista looked up. "Ah, Dr. Morgan, your usual table next to Miss Gold." He nodded, turning to her. "May I sit here?" "Of course." He placed the book on the table, The Architecture of Emotion, its spine cracked, corners frayed. "I've been reading it forever," he said with a small laugh. "Teaching, writing, and trying to relearn how to believe in people." "You're a doctor?" "Psychologist. I work at a rehab center for veterans." Binta's gaze lingered on his hands, rough, with faint scars. "That sounds like work that walks through a lot of darkness." "It is. But how would you ever know what light is worth if you don't walk through darkness?" The words hit something deep inside her. Just a heartbeat, but it stayed. She remembered Dr. Amara Lewis, her therapist, saying something like that once. The universe may have had a way of sending kindred souls who had also survived the long night. They talked for hours about books, design, the rain, and the quiet rhythm of Seattle life. No pretenser, no masks. Only the comfort of two people who had nothing left to hide. As he stood to leave, he said, "I'm hosting a talk on emotional recovery next week at the Adana Center. I'd like you to speak, too, about rebuilding life after losing it." She blinked, surprised. "You know who I am?" "Who in this city doesn't?" he said gently. "But I don't want the story from the news. I want your story." Sunlight streamed through the window, lighting his hazel eyes honest and warm. Binta smiled. "All right, but only when the tulips bloom. I like their yellow." "Then you're in luck," he said. "Tulip season has just begun." The day of the talk, the room at Adana Center was full. Binta stepped up to the stage, no notes, no speech prepared. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a heartbeat. "I used to think when one door closed, the world ended. I was wrong. If you stand still long enough, you'll hear another door opening, maybe right behind you." She paused, eyes falling on Dr. Morgan in the front row. "Some wounds never truly heal. But that's all right. They remind us we lived, we loved, and we survived." The room was silent, only the sound of many hearts beating together, people who had all known pain. When it ended, Morgan came up quietly and handed her a yellow tulip. "You were right," he said. "Light returns when we learn to be still." Binta smiled softly. "Maybe I'm starting to believe that again." In the weeks that followed, Morgan began stopping by the Adana Center. He didn't flirt, didn't pry. He was there, helping kids paint and fixing a leaky faucet. She read quietly while she worked. Eleanor noticed first. One evening, she watched Binta sorting files and said, "What do you think of him?" "I'm not sure, but I don't need to defend myself when he's around. Sometimes peace is the loudest language of love, Binta." Binta laughed softly. "I'm afraid I've forgotten how to love." "No one forgets. You're just learning to love differently." Tulip season reached its peak. Fields north of the city turned to gold. Morgan invited her to join the Adana children on a picnic there. While the kids ran among the flowers, the two wandered to the field's far end. Wind swayed the tulips. Sunlight kissed her face. "Do you ever feel happy?" he asked quietly, "without needing to be strong, perfect, or right?" Binta smiled. "Right now." He paused. "If I said I'd like to walk beside you, not to fix, not to teach, just to walk, would you let me?" She looked at him. For the first time in years, her eyes held no fear. "I won't make promises, but I won't close the door." He nodded and took her hand. Warmth spread between their fingers, gentle, real. From a distance, the children shouted, "Miss Binta, look, a rainbow." She looked up. Across the sky, after a brief sun shower, a rainbow arched over the golden tulip field. She laughed a light, wind-soft laugh. "Yes," she whispered, "it really is the season of yellow flowers." That night, back home, Binta opened the window. The sky glowed amber. The air smelled of tulips. Eleanor sat knitting by the table and looked up, smiling. "You've got light in your eyes again." Binta sat beside her, resting her head on her shoulder. "Maybe it's because of someone. Or maybe because I finally stopped being afraid to love." "Either way," Eleanor said softly, "this season belongs to you." They sat silently, listening to the night, the wind, the quiet pulse of peace. Outside, Seattle shimmered in gold. Binta knew no one could take away the years behind her, but she also knew every new season is a chance to bloom again. This time, for herself. 10 years later, Seattle glowed beneath the morning mist, a city reborn. Along the lakeside streets, where moss once crept up the walls, now stood rows of green trees and bright community homes bearing a familiar sign. Gold Restoration, a home for everyone. Binta walked that road, her low heels tapping softly against the pavement, her white coat catching the faint light. She was still beautiful, but it was no longer the beauty of power or wealth. It was the beauty of someone who had finally found peace. A little girl, about 7, ran up and wrapped her arms around Binta's legs. "Miss Binta, I finished reading a whole book today." Binta bent down, eyes shining. "That's wonderful, Lily. How do you feel?" "Like I can fly." "Then keep flying, little one, wherever the light leads you." She straightened, gazing up at the sky. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, brushing over open windows. Behind each window lived a story of someone rescued, someone rebuilt, someone who had lost everything but still chose love. Eleanor was frail now, yet still loved sitting by the window watching the children play. She lived with Binta in the lakeside home, a house that once held pain, but was filled with warmth, laughter, and 2 generations of strength. That morning, Binta poured her tea. "How do you feel today, Mama?" "Old," Eleanor smiled, "but at peace. I can rest easy knowing you're no longer afraid." Binta took her hand. "Because of you. Because of everyone who crossed my path, even the ones who hurt me. So, you've forgiven Adam. I have him, myself, and the past."
"Because forgiveness isn't surrender, it's freedom." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then you've learned the greatest lesson of all, Binta." That afternoon, a letter arrived at the Gold Foundation office. The handwriting was steady, familiar. A. Marshall. Binta unfolded it slowly. "Binta, I'm writing from New Orleans, where the Restorers opened its first branch. We teach 16-year-old boys how to understand their emotions, respect others, and break the patterns of their fathers. Every time I see them smile, I remember what you once said. People only grow up when they learn not to hurt loved ones. I finally understand. Thank you for everything. One day, if you ever hear about a program that teaches men how to be kind, I hope you'll smile, because you're the reason it exists. Wishing you peace. Adam." Binta folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer. No tears, no trembling, just a soft, steady breath closing the last page of a once painful book.
She looked at the photo on her desk, her mother, Adana, standing in a golden field, smiling widely. "I did it, Mama," Binta whispered. "I learned how to turn pain into light." That summer evening, the Adana Center celebrated its 10th anniversary. Children sang "This Little Light of Mine" on stage, and the hall glowed with candlelight. Morgan sat in the front row, his quiet smile unchanged. He and Binta had never married, never signed papers they didn't need to. Their bond was calm and straightforward, the kind that didn't cage love to prove it was real. Together, they grew the foundation, carrying its light across the country. When the lights dimmed, Binta stepped to the stage. Hundreds of faces flickered in candlelight as her voice filled the room. "I used to think life divided people into winners and losers. But after everything, I've learned that there are no winners or losers.
There are only those who learn to love again, and those still afraid to." She paused, her eyes shining. "If you've been hurt, remember this. Your cracks don't make you weaker. They're just the paths that let the light in." The audience rose to their feet, clapping through tears. Eleanor wept softly. Morgan took her hand and squeezed. Later, Binta stepped outside. A faint rainbow stretched over Seattle's sky after a gentle rain.
She whispered, "Mama, I think I finally belong to the light." Morgan joined her, handing her a cup of warm tea. "They say people remember the exact moment they find peace, because that's when we know we're home." "And where is home for you, Binta?" She smiled. "Here, in this light, in every laugh out there." They stood side by side, silent, no promises, no past, just the present, soft, whole, and true. That night, back at the lakeside house, Binta opened the window.
The air was cool. The tulip Morgan had given her glowed golden in the lamplight. She touched its petals and closed her eyes. In her dream, she saw them all, her mother, Eleanor, Adam, Josephine, the children, the homes full of light. All the pieces of a life were rebuilt, a life that had learned to heal through love, wisdom, and grace. And then she heard her mother's voice, soft as wind. "My daughter, you never needed to belong to anyone. You only needed to belong to the light." Binta smiled in her sleep, the smile of someone who had finally come home. Binta Gold didn't just rebuild her life, she redefined love itself. Because real love isn't possession or surrender, it's standing side by side, both facing the light. Thank you, dear listener, for walking, crying, and smiling with Binta Gold through this long journey. Maybe each of us has been Binta once, loving someone until we lose ourselves. But the miracle is this: we can always begin again. If you're hearing this on a quiet evening, remember, you don't need to belong to anyone. You only need to belong to the light, to kindness, to compassion, to love that frees. And if this story touched you, leave a light behind. Tap like, subscribe, and comment. I choose the light, because perhaps your small spark tonight might guide someone still lost in the dark.